we've never met before, my name's Ashley, I'm 23, and I'm going to be ranting to you today about my Master's by Research journey. It's been a hard one, not gonna lie. I'm gonna try to make this as concise as possible, but there is a lot of information and a lot of different things over the span of about 2 years, so it's been a long time coming. So if you want to come with me on the ride, sit down, grab a snack, grab a cup of coffee, and let's get into it. So just to start things off, I got my undergraduate degree up at the University of Maine in marine science with a concentration in marine biology. I loved it up there. I had a great 4 years. Definitely a difficult degree. I just think college in general is a super stressful atmosphere, extremely difficult, extremely hard, regardless of your background. I graduated, I got my degree in May of 2019, and ever since then I've been here with my family, super grateful, in New Jersey, trying to get into a master's program. I knew pretty early on in my undergraduate career that I knew I wanted to pursue school further with my master's, my doctorate, etc., in hopefully research. I was super fortunate growing up to be able to vacation to Alaska a handful of times growing up, so I would say by middle school I knew that I wanted to go to college for marine science. I knew I had a strong fascination with marine mammals. It started out in my middle school and high school times being super interested in whales, specifically killer whales, humpback whales, the whole bit. And once I started my undergraduate career, I knew I had a strong fascination with marine mammals. It started out in my middle school and high school times being super interested in whales, specifically killer whales, humpback whales, the whole bit. The summer after my freshman year of my undergrad, I was super fortunate and I got the internship of my absolute dreams up at the Alaska Sea Life Center. I worked with wildlife response, so I basically spent a summer taking care of harbor seal pups and sea otter pups, and I would go on response calls, and it was just the most incredible experience. And I definitely grew a strong love, if not obsession, with seals. They are hilarious. They are so funny. They're the best. So I would say after my freshman year, I really started to have an increasing fascination with seals, sea lions, walruses, the whole pinniped family, which is what they're all under. Science fact of the day, pinnipeds consist of seals, sea lions, walruses, fur seals, which technically aren't seals, they're sea lions, but okay, I'm gonna try not to get too sciencey for you. So I would say by my sophomore, junior year of college, I knew that I wanted to do something with seals growing up. I definitely really appreciated the experience in the internship that I got while up in Alaska working with wildlife response. Even was some little bit of vet tech in there as well. I helped administer meds, I was there for blood draws, etc. But I knew I always wanted to be the person that was finding out the answers, that was hypothesizing and just piecing things together. So I knew by my junior year that I really wanted to continue on with a master's of some sort, doing preferably research on seals or any sort of marine mammals, but being only a junior at the time, I knew I still had much more research to do and figuring out what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, the whole bit. So now that you have a background, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how I chose the school that I have been spending the last 2 years trying to get into. I kid you not, almost 2 years. October 2018 is when I started first reaching out to professors for a master's program. So if you're unfamiliar with the research field, which I was clueless going into, I knew that by my senior year of college that I needed to start getting ready for grad school, or I would say by like the spring of my junior years when I started prepping for the GREs. I thought that I needed to take the GREs, which I did. And in the States, you almost always need the GRE scores to apply, but internationally they don't give a crap about the GREs, or at least a lot of the programs that I ended up really becoming interested in. I'm happy I did it because my backup plan was to do a degree here in the States. So I guess we'll go back a bit. So I would say the one thing is I really wish that my undergraduate degree prepped me much more for real world, getting ready for grad school kind of stuff, like reaching out to professors and applying in general. It's a very time consuming process. It's basically like finding a needle in the haystack and hoping that it works for you. If you're unfamiliar with the research field, basically how applying to a master's or doctorate with research involved is you not only have to apply to the school and find a school that works for you and a program that works for you and a spot that works for you in the world, but you also have to find a professor that wants you in their lab, that has funding for you in their lab on top of that. So it's almost like it's a two-part thing. Yes, you have, so also, sorry, my hands are orange because I tie-dyed earlier. So excuse that. But, so basically you have to find a school that works for you, you have to get into that school, but then you also have to find a professor that works for you, that has room in their lab, that has funding for you, and the real kicker is doing research that you're interested in. And not only is it hard to find researchers doing research that you're interested in, but also you have to find a researcher that is affiliated with a university that is able to take on students, because if they're not affiliated with the university, then you can't technically even get a degree doing research with them. To connect the dots a bit, after doing hours and hours of research, figuring out what programs to apply to and what professors were affiliated with the university doing research that I was remotely interested in, I sent out emails to maybe around 30 professors all around the world conducting research that I was interested in the hopes that they had room in their lab to take me on as a student for a 2-year master's program. At first I was pretty disheartened not getting many responses, but there's a lot of things that go into it. Like I mentioned, they could just not have room in their lab, not taking students at the moment due to funding, or just plainly don't have an interest in you. A couple did reach back to me, and one of the ones that did was a professor from the University of Tasmania, which if you've been following me for a while on Instagram, it's been such a long journey. So basically 2 out of the 3 or 4 professors, I can't remember exactly how many, got back to me. I ended up contacting further, and we ended up chatting and just talking about the possibilities of working together and applying for that university. And one of them was the University of Tasmania, and the other was one in California. The one in California, long story short, the professor was lovely. It was a great opportunity financially as well. Being in the States, I essentially would have had to pay for tuition, doing some sort of teachership there. But at the end of the day, the professor wasn't doing specific research that I was really interested in. It was with seals, it was cool research, but at the end of the day, it wasn't what I was interested in. It actually was with genetics, and I'm not super knowledgeable in genetics, but I know it's not exactly what I'm intrigued in. I ended up, kindly declining the offer, and I ended up pursuing completely with the University of Tasmania. So if you're still watching this far, first off, thank you so much as I get into the nitty-gritty of my journey with the University of Tasmania over in Australia, for those of you who aren't sure. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but anyway, let's get into it. So my journey with the University of Tasmania began in October 2018, the fall semester of my senior year at the University of Maine. It is now September 2020. I graduated in May 2019, so I have been home with my family for over a year now, which is much longer than I ever anticipated. I was very just caught in the notion that once you graduate your undergrad, you start your master's. That's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. That's just what I grew up around. And that definitely contributes to, especially at the beginning, a lot of the anxiety of not starting my master's in the fall semester after I graduated my undergrad. But me going after not only an international program, choosing not to pursue a program here in the States because none fit the research that I was interested in. At first, it was intimidating because Australia, and also when I was studying abroad in New Zealand, their semesters don't have a fall spring. It's semester 1 and semester 2, so start February and then July. And at first there was talks of me starting my degree and applying to start at the University of Tasmania in July of 2019. And me knowing myself and me knowing that that's just too quick to graduate in May, pack up my life, have almost no savings, have to start paying off my student loans later that year, I knew that that wasn't a smart move for me. I wanted to breathe for once in my life. And I'm very happy that I was like, you know what, it's too soon. And she was like, okay, let's keep in touch. So it was like, awesome. So 2019 went on. I was just working full-time here in New Jersey. We kept in touch, and then we were like, okay, let's aim for earlier this year. So early 2020. I was like, that's completely fine. I think that's great. That gives me enough time to, spend some extra time home before I move across the world. Extra time with my cat, who is currently on my shoes somewhere. And I told my jobs, okay, I am leaving in February. And then it gets closer to February, and then I talk with my professor, and we're like, you know what, I think it would work better to not start in February and instead start my research later in the year, closer to the seal breeding season. Earlier this year, we didn't have a set proposal yet. We were in the works of it, but we decided to do our research around Australian fur seals. And then I mentioned I had a strong interest in thermal physiology. And so what was also a really big contributing factor to me wanting to go with this university, with this professor, and with this program, this degree, this whole experience is, in the States, it's very rare going, especially for your master's, that you create your own research project. Typically, you choose a professor and you just tag along with whatever they've already done or whatever they plan on doing. You don't really get to start it from scratch. But at the University of Tasmania, the professor mentioned to me, well, no, you get to come up with your own proposal, you get to choose. And at first I was super intimidated. I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm trusted to come up with a proposal, like, just out of my undergrad? Like, this is insane. And ultimately, that's how we decided on Australian fur seals. It was a species that she's already worked with and would be accessible being in Tasmania. There's colonies not far down from where the main university campus is, so on and so forth, and she had other connections around Australia for a couple other fur seal colonies. So anyway, Australian fur seals was the species that was the big thing to start off the proposal. And then I mentioned I have a strong interest in thermal physiology. As I mentioned earlier in this video, climate change and just the effects in general really interest me, and not much has been done on the baseline thermal physiology of many organisms to begin with, but especially with pinnipeds, with seals. So ever since about February of 2020, especially, we started creating this dream proposal to do my master's. Again, very, very uncommon, especially just coming out of your undergrad, to be told that you can create your dream master's program, like your dream research proposal from the very beginning. And of course, this was super intimidating, but it was enticing, and I was like so excited. I was so grateful. I was like, oh my goodness, like there isn't a project in a program that is my dream, so I get to create it essentially. And the professor's all for it and everything. And so earlier this year, still about February 2020, right before the pandemic hit, we were like, okay, let's aim for July, August, like late summer, and it'll be great because the seals will be super active in the Australian breeding season, which is around September, October. It'll be a great time to collect samples. We'll have more than enough time to prep. It would give me a couple months to get settled, to move in. It'll be great. And so again, me being me, I get attached to things. I try my hardest not to get my hopes up, but of course I did. And for once, I was like, oh my goodness, I have my life figured out. I know where I'm going. I'm so excited. This is insane. I was so proud of myself. And then March hit, March of 2020. I feel like I should have like a timeline up here. If I have like any graphic skills, maybe I will. But March 2020 hit, as you all know, the pandemic, and a lot was still up in the air at the beginning of it, but you know, just like a lot of people, I didn't think it would last as long as it has. So March, April, May go along. I still have hope. You know, nothing's certain, but I still have hope that I could still finish my proposal, which is the final part of the application. So essentially, this application was also super different to what I was used to. Instead of just finding a professor, applying, and being like, yes, you're in, or no, you're not, it was like I submitted my expression of interest back in February 2019 when I was like full on set to be like, yes, I want to come to this university and do research with this professor. And then after that, it was, okay, find your professor, which I did. And then the last part of the application, which took the longest for me, was the research proposal. Starting research from scratch is a very time-consuming thing, and I'm extremely grateful that regardless of what happens from here, that I had the opportunity to do that, especially right out of my undergrad, which is like mind-blowing to me. So anyway, the final part of my application to submit it to the University of Tasmania was finishing the research proposal, which took a lot of time, but we got it finished, which was submitted for the application round mid-June of this year. So mid-June 2020. I submitted everything. We put together the proposal. No idea what was happening with the pandemic, but in the proposal we mentioned some different options if the travel bans continue, which obviously they still are, and everything. So, you know, we're like all for it. It's like, okay, awesome. So rest of June and July 2020, I would say was pretty, you know, average. I was hopeful, a lot of anxiety regarding the pandemic, because at the end of the day I thought that this would be the reason that I wasn't able to travel or move, obviously, to start my degree. So that was a lot of anxiety, which I'm sure so many of you are feeling regarding the pandemic, and I am so sorry. I am here with you. And so August comes around, and it said I was supposed to find out for my decision of my application by around August 1st. And I didn't get an email or anything. And it was like August 7th, and I was like, okay, I didn't hear anything, but I'm sure everything's delayed just with everything going on. So I was trying to think about it because it was just making me anxious. And then I woke up morning August 10th, 2020. The first thing I do every morning once turning off my 6,000 alarms, because I set so many, is check my email. Because especially since this whole grad process, I'm always frantically checking my email to see if professors reach out or so on and so forth. So it was about 7:30 a.m. August 10th, 2020, and I see this super vague email from the University of Tasmania, and basically it was like maybe 3 sentences total, and it said, we got a lot of applications, your application was unsuccessful. And of course I was super confused, I was super frustrated with myself for feeling not good enough, but more than anything just confused and anxious, because I thought at first, well, maybe it's because of the pandemic, maybe they're not taking international students. And so that was the hardest thing, I'm not gonna lie, it was the hardest thing. And I mean, if you've been following me on Instagram, Coffee Nut with 3 E's, that same morning, not even a half hour later, I checked my DM requests on Instagram after finding out the worst news of my life. At least it felt like it at the time. And I saw Hugh Jackman mention me in his stories of his coffee lover of the week, which is a whole nother thing, which I'll save for a separate story time if you don't follow me on Instagram, but we're pals now. So it was just a super difficult day, a lot of emotions, and of course, regardless of what happened with, my coffee Instagram and all the love I was getting that day, of course my heart was where my degree is, which is my passion, my dream career, all of the above. And so that was really hard, but I was really confused, and it was just a super vague email. When you apply to universities or schools of any kind, you kind of get more of a straight answer of hi, you're accepted, or hi, you're rejected. And just the words unsuccessful was just super vague and just really weird. And I was trying to contact my professor, I didn't hear from her. I was trying to contact the university, I didn't hear from them. I was trying to contact the research office, didn't hear from them. And 3 weeks went by. 3 weeks of agony, 3 weeks of anxiety, 3 weeks of having no idea, 3 weeks feeling like I felt so lost. And now it comes to about last week. And everyone kept asking, what's your plan B? What's your plan B? And I was like, well, I've looked at all these universities, none of them have what I want. Like, should I just pick a research project that I'm not really interested in and a university that's elsewhere? Like, the application process for this coming fall, I'm sure is long gone. Some universities don't even take students in the spring. Like, there's just a lot that goes into it. And so I was all over. And deep breath. Thankfully, I'm not getting emotional, which I thought I was. So thanks for sticking around if you're still here. So for those 3 weeks, I didn't hear anything from anyone. I was emailing back and forth, left and right. The communication process in general to the university has never been great, as universities in Australia and New Zealand now are moving, or have already moved to a more centralized situation where you kind of contact one person, like one common email, and then it gets like dispersed instead of like, here's a direct contact to this department, like talk to them, which is very frustrating. I hit a breaking point last Thursday, and I was like, you know what? I am sick of waiting. I'm sick of putting myself through this literal cycle of anxiety of 2 minutes being fine and being like, it's okay, like things will work out, and then 2 minutes later feeling so lost. And so it's like, this is, obviously this is ridiculous. And I sent so many emails to so many different people, just waiting, frantically checking my email. Again, not great for my anxiety. So finally, Thursday night, I was like, you know what? With the time difference, I had to wait to the end of the day, but I called the research the graduate research office at the university. Spoke with a lovely woman. She gave me great insight, stuff that I was frustrated to hear, but it was just great to have answers and have a direction. And super sweet woman. And the biggest things that I got from this phone call last Thursday night was that, one, she couldn't see anything in my application that was wrong. Like, there were no notes on the end of the university saying like, oh, this was wrong, or fix this, or you need more of this. And then two was that I was under the impression, being an international master's student, it's really difficult to get funding for research, especially being an international master's student. They save most of it for doctorates, especially if you're international, at least in my experience in the marine science field. And so I was under the impression that I was probably going to have to pay for it out of pocket, but there were options on the application to tick off saying that if you were interested in scholarships. And so of course I was like, yes, I would love to be considered. And after the phone call with this lovely woman, she mentioned that typically they don't even offer positions. They don't offer research candidature to international students if they don't have a scholarship. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess that makes sense because funding is limited to begin with, especially with the pandemic. I got some insight, and then finally I heard back from my professor, and we ended up Skyping last night, which, oh my gosh, when I got that email from her, so many emotions went through my head, but I got the email and we ended up chatting last night, and she was doing her diligence in the last couple weeks on her end, even though I didn't hear from her, about all of the false advertising and false information that was given to me being an international student trying to get a master's by research. And the exact degree I was applying for, or am applying for, isn't a common one to apply for. A lot of people just do coursework or coursework with some research at the end of it, whereas I wanted to, since I knew what I was interested in, what I wanted to do, I wanted to put all of my time and energy on a 2-year-long research project so that I could work on start to finish, get as many publications as I could out of it, and be able to get all of the skills and connections to move on to my doctorate. So the specific degree that I was after wasn't a super common one. There was a lot of false advertising, a lot of false information, a lot of false leads. I was under a bunch of different impressions than what was actually reality. Not only the scholarship thing, but just a lot in general. I was under the impression that basically the final application process was more so just the university approving your proposal. I didn't realize it was, okay, you're getting put up against hundreds of applicants and you're all fighting for the same scholarship funding, and if you don't get scholarship funding, you don't get in. Also, another thing that I ended up realizing with my call last night is that not only was I competing for scholarship funding versus over 150 applicants, more importantly to note is that I was going up against mostly doctorate students. And so, of course, the university is going to favor picking doctorate students over master's students for many reasons. But first and foremost, of course, doctorate students are going to have a lot more experience than someone going in for their master's. So it was almost setting myself up to fail with the way that my application was processed. The path it went through was also being put up against doctorate students, which is extremely unfair and not right in the slightest.
So basically, since my degree isn't commonly chosen as a pathway within the university system, the way that my application was processed was completely false, completely unfair, and was put up against doctorate students. Why would you put masters up against doctorate students for the same funding? It is not fair, and it was 100% their fault.
Anyway, back to the call last night. So we had a great chat, and it was really nice to hear on her end. She's meeting with different people within the department, out of the department, higher ups, to get to the bottom of this and just basically just make the biggest thing that I want out of all of this experience, and a reason why I want to sit down and make this video, is because I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. The anxiety, the unknowns, all of this, just all of these things and emotions. You think going for your master's, it's pretty straightforward. It's like, getting another degree, but no, especially with research, it is so different, and I just really wish that my undergrad prepped me more for this. The fact that my professor is doing all of this work on her end to make sure this advertising and the way that the degree is perceived to people from their website and the department and so on and so forth for future students is more than I could ask for. I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. And I also hope in the future for future students, and hopefully for me too, that it's much easier to get in contact with people to answer questions, or I hope that the information is more laid out clearly so that I'm not spending hours on their university website trying to find information that is not there or is like, you know, vague or cryptid and just super difficult to get to. So I'm very happy that my professor, my supervisor knows that, and she is working hard on her end so this doesn't happen again to anyone in the future. So now, what's next? Long story short, I have no idea. But I'm hopeful that the plan is to rework my proposal a bit and apply again for the next application round this coming October. I'm hoping that I will get in this time around, this application round, and that I will hopefully be starting my degree at the University of Tasmania with the research proposal of my dreams for a 2 years master's by research sometime next year. I'm so hopeful. My goodness, this is the part where I'm gonna get emotional. You know, I didn't think going into this that it was going to be so much lost hope, wishful thinking, anxiety, back and forth, spending hours just checking my emails to see if I get anything in return. And so I'm hopeful that I can continue on with this. Me and my professor have spent so long putting together this proposal. I hope that we can do it, even if it's tweaked a bit. But I hope to do my degree next year at the University of Tasmania, looking at the thermal physiology of Australian fur seals, and using infrared cameras and looking at their baseline physiology, which is currently not known. There's a lot of knowledge gaps. I really hope. But if you came this far, thank you. That is my journey. If you've come this far, please leave a comment. I want to know if you've watched this entire thing. Give it a like, subscribe, join me on my journey to getting into a master's program of my dreams, hopefully moving across the world, conducting my own research, while also drinking lots of coffee and flat whites.